Yeah, so welcome from me. And yes, we're wrapping up. So this is the final talk on this series where we've been exploring the Diamond Sutra really, perhaps I should say definitely not directly. We've really been exploring it through a commentary, through our teacher, Sangharakshita's teaching, his commentary in this book, which is called Wisdom Beyond Words. And actually, there's a notable absence tonight. So if you've been joining in other weeks, we have had we've had an image of Prajnaparamita, who is an archetypal Buddhist figure, the mother of all Buddhas, and it's like she is the wisdom. She is a sort of embodiment. She is a figure where wisdom becomes an enlightened being. That is Prajnaparamita. Now, Prajnaparamita has gone to her real home, so she was borrowed very generously for quite a few weeks. So Prajnaparamita has gone to her home. So we're here with the Buddha, which is equally as appropriate. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the final section of the Diamond Sutra and the final section of this commentary. But I just thought I'd say a few things, kind of an overview to start with, just to kind of gather our thoughts of what's happened over the few weeks. So the Diamond Sutra is often called, translation of the Vajrachedika Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Vajrachedika Prajnaparamita Sutra, which means wisdom. Vajrachedika means that wisdom that cuts like a diamond, and Prajnaparamita means perfection of wisdom. So perfection of wisdom that cuts like a diamond. And yes, this text is not from the time of the Buddha. So in the Buddhist canon, we've got a huge amount of texts that describe the life of the historical Buddha. Now those were passed on orally, those stories, and then written down several hundred years after the Buddha. But that's not the end of the Buddhist canon. It develops and it grows, and there was a flowering of Buddhist thought, Buddhist discovery, literature, culture, some several hundred years after that, which we call the Mahayana, the Great Wheel. And the Prajnaparamita Sutras are part of that explosion, really, of Buddhist thought, Buddhist culture, Buddhist wisdom. And it's interesting that there's a phenomena called Buddhavachana. So that means like the voice of the Buddha. And so any text that has the kind of authority of enlightenment, perhaps the voice of an enlightened teacher, or a very, very profound teaching that's often these texts aren't authored, so they're sort of collectively written, collectively created through meditation, through the culture of certain Buddhist centres of thought. So those texts are called Buddhavachana, and so we treat them as though they're the voice of the Buddha. They're as profound, they're as reliable in a way. We might not always understand them, but they're treated in that way. So the Prajnaparamita Sutras, which there are quite an array of them, we take very, very seriously as Buddhist practitioners. Some Buddhist traditions, the Diamond Sutra is like one of the main components, and in China and other countries it would be very, very well known by Buddhist practitioners, recited every day, studied, etc. So it's a significant Buddhist teaching. And I quite like visiting the British Library, which is in London, and this has a collection of, the books are just fascinating, of books from the earliest times that books were made. And some of the oldest printed books are actually copies of these wisdom texts. So I think the one that I'm thinking of is the oldest dated printed book, and that is a copy of the Vajrachedika Sutra. And it was a Chinese copy, so the version we're talking about comes from Sanskrit, and then it was taken up by the Chinese. There was a huge Buddhist, flourishing Buddhist, I don't know what you call it, era in China. So there are these beautiful scrolls printed with very intricate images of the Buddha and Subhuti, who's a character who appears, and all sorts of beautiful ornamentation. This lovely scroll. So sort of placing it historically a little bit, and then sort of placing it more contemporarily. This Diamond Sutra was when our teacher Sangharakshita read it age 16. He had a profound response to it, and I've written down his response. What did he say? He says it was an overwhelming experience that changed the course of his whole life. So he read the Diamond Sutra, this sort of abstruse Indian philosophical logic chopping text. He read it. It had an impact on him that changed the course of his whole life. And he says he knew not only that he was a Buddhist, but he had always been a Buddhist. And that didn't mean like for the last few years. It meant something much deeper than that. That his Buddhism perhaps predated his current incarnation. That's how I take it to mean anyway. So in this way, us studying here at the London Buddhist Centre, studying this commentary, that imparts some of the significance it has, and the fact that it changed the course of the Sangharakshita's whole life means that actually it's changed the course of my whole life. If he hadn't have realised he was a Buddhist, I wouldn't be sitting here today, and who knows, I might not have realised that I'm a Buddhist too. So the impact has been far-ranging, even in a little snippet of my life now. So, and just to contextualise the sutra, so I referred to the earlier Buddhist canon, the Pali canon, which was descriptions of the historical Buddha's life. And very often they were set in, they're stories set in historical sites in India. And so if you've been on pilgrimage in India or been around the area where the Buddha lived, you'll know some of these sites. And so the stories sort of happen there. Vulture's Peak was one of the famous ones, where the Buddha would spend time in teaching. And this, quite unusually, I think, for Mahayana sutras, this is set there. It's set in India. So it starts off a little bit like an early Buddhist story about Shakyamuni. It starts in Anatta Pindika's park, which is a place, I've been there, in Jeta's Grove. It's a place where the Buddha and his disciples would spend many rainy seasons meditating, teaching, etc. And what happens is an elderly practitioner monk called Subhuti, not Subhuti, who is the president of our London Buddhist Centre, but a different Subhuti, comes to speak to the Buddha, and he asks the Buddha a question. He's very, very reverential, and he asks the Buddha, if someone who's set themselves on the Bodhisattva path, how should we proceed, and how should we control our thoughts? And then the rest of the discourse is the Buddha's response and conversation in relation to Subhuti. And I'm not going to, we've covered quite a lot over the seminars over the last few weeks, so I'm not going to go into the detail of that, other than to say that Subhuti is very receptive, very full of faith, I would say, and the Buddha really, what would I say? The response is that the Buddha has are confounding. They take quite a lot of reading, even for me to understand what the sentence is, because there are so many negations. It's like this. It's not this nor that. Neither is it this or that. And if I said it was that, then it's not, kind of thing. It's not unusual for medieval Indian philosophical discourse to be spoken in this way. Sangharakshita describes it as metaphysical exuberance. And what you get is a series of concepts which we will all have, even if we think we're not conceptual people. I think that's quite interesting. Even if we think we're not conceptual people, we will have concepts. We will be carrying around and operating through the world of concepts. You get a series of concepts about what a bodhisattva is, what a bodhisattva thinks, what a bodhisattva's practice is. And the concepts are continually negated and dismissed by other concepts at a more and more refined level. So, what's interesting is that Sangharakshita says, the medium is not the message in this. So if you think, oh great, I've understood this intellectually, this is really sort of satisfying and meaty thought material, I'm really enjoying this. That's great, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not the message. The message that the Buddha is trying to convey can't be conveyed through concepts. Nevertheless, we need to have our conceptual world sort of broken down to smithereens. So the medium is not the message, and that's a warning. It's nothing to do with being intellectual. So some of us might find that challenging, and some of us might find that a relief, depending on your temperament. The really nice thing is that this evening we're going to have a change of pace from that. And we're going to look at the most famous, I think it's the most famous, or the most well-known aspect of the Diamond Sutra, this beautiful ending that takes us out of this conceptual metaphysical discussion into the world of image and poetry. So I'll read you the verse, which I have failed to mark in my book. I'll read. Oh no, I haven't. I've done it. Yes. So this simile or metaphor says, as stars, a fault of vision, as a lamp, a mock show, dewdrops, or a bubble, a dream, a lightning flash, or cloud, so one should view what is conditioned. I'll read it again. As stars, a fault of vision, a lamp, a mock show, dewdrops, or a bubble, a dream, a lightning flash, or cloud, so should one view what is conditioned. So lovely, recognisable set of images from nature, from the physical world, and sort of the very earthy and beautiful imagery, familiar to us through all sorts of poetic traditions there. So maybe I'll say something about those, this approach. So in some ways, perhaps these images are easier for us to digest, to get closer to the meaning of what the Diamond Sutra is trying to convey. And what it does is it suggests to us that we watch, we ponder, we look carefully at these phenomena. All of them have got this kind of quality of mystery, fleetingness and beauty. This evening we'll sort of tease apart some of the meanings that we might perhaps find in these verses and in the particular images. but that if we can really look closely at them, there will be something to be revealed. And that's what a metaphor is doing that. It's taking something that we know, so we know what a dewdrop is like, and then we apply it to something that we don't normally apply it to. So we apply the nature of a dewdrop, which is what tiny, fragile, temporary, beautiful, sort of trembling on reflecting light on the tip of a blade of grass, etc. We take those qualities and we expand it into other things that we don't normally associate with a dewdrop. So that could be our own lives, it could be our loved ones, it could be the solid material reality which we seem to need to rely on. And we take that, we study, we get a really strong feeling for the images, and we take it into areas where we don't normally bring those reflections. And there's a historical precedent for these images. They're not new to the Diamond Sutra. So in the Pali Canon, so the stories from the historical Buddha's life, there's a sutra called the Foam Sutra, the Foam Sutta, sorry. And there are 5 images that the Buddha talks about that he applies to different aspects of our experience. So the 5 skandhas, which are modes that we apprehend our experience, the 5 skandhas. We don't particularly need to worry about too much what they are, but in the Foam Sutta, the Buddha says that our body is like foam. Our feelings, our sensations are like bubbles, as fleeting and insubstantial as both of these. Our perceptions are like a mirage. And he says, our volitions, our will, our choices, our habits are like a plantain tree, which doesn't have a centre, so it's like an onion in a way. If you cut a banana tree, apparently is the same, like it's just made of leaves wrapping around leaves. So you go to cut one down, you're like, okay, I'm going to get the cut. So the centre, the heartwood of the plantain tree, you keep chopping, and you just end up with a load of leaves on the floor. There's nothing at the centre. So our volitions, which seem so strong, don't they, are as insubstantial as a plantain tree. And consciousness is like a magical illusion, like being hypnotised by a magician. And I can't help, although we're talking about the Diamond Sutra, I can't help just that this Foam Sutta is very beautiful, and the Buddha says that if we want to realise the truth of things, we need to practice with the vigour of someone whose head is ablaze. So we need to understand our experience in these ways as fleeting and insubstantial, but with the vigour we need to be tireless and dedicated as someone whose head is ablaze, which is quite I felt a bit poked by that statement, because I have to admit that my practice isn't always that urgent. And these, I think, these poetic images are very sweet, they're very attractive, beautiful, aren't they? They're sort of easy to take. But what they're actually doing, if we apply them to the very core of our views of our being, what these images do is undermine the very foundations of how we operate in the world. So what they're doing, if you say my life is like a bubble or as fleeting as a dewdrop, that goes against not only our day-to-day thoughts and habits, but the very sort of fundamental, deeply seated mode of operating that says me, me at all costs, me and mine at all costs. So these delicate images are very, very powerful if we practice, if we use them as reflective practice. Yeah, so maybe just talk about some of the images separately actually. What I've noticed when I was reflecting on these images, that some of them point in one direction and some point in other directions. So I think what they're getting to is the illusory nature of our experience, which we can explore, the impermanent nature of our experience, and the insubstantial nature of our experience. And the first vision that I thought we could talk about is, I don't think we've got time to go through them all, but I'm just picking out a few to illustrate points. The first one is the image of a lamp. It's not the kind of lamps that we've got lighting up our little film set at the London Buddhist Centre. I was talking about a lamp that's lit by a wick that's burning. So that we should view that which is conditioned like a lamp. Well, what does that mean? Have you ever watched a flame flickering? Have you? I'm sure most of us have. They're mesmerising, aren't they? This, I'm just sort of thinking that so many times someone's had a bonfire, maybe it's getting late and a certain hush falls around the bonfire. Sometimes everyone's just sitting there and staring at the flames and the sparks. They're absolutely mesmerising. And even just staring at a candle flame, like, what is a flame? What is it? You can't even say, I don't know what you can say about it. You can say that it's hot, but you can't say where the edge is, can you? You can't say where you could put it. You can't say where one flame starts and another flame ends. Is it, if you light a candle, burn it for a few hours, is the flame that you have at the end of the few hours the same flame that you had at the start? Well, how could you say it is if it's if you watch it, it's just sort of combusting, it's just flickering. It's absolutely ungraspable, and not just because it burn your hand, but it's the without substance. A fantastic, potent image to apply to our own experience. And in a way, perhaps a flame is easier to reflect on than something that's solid, because we can say, oh yeah, I can see the flux that's happening in the flame. It's really obvious. We can just say that is its nature, that is flux. But what about more solid things? I'm sitting on a wooden floor, and now I've been coming to the LBC for 14 years, and I know it's the same wooden floor that I've stood on. They haven't relaid it. So it's all too easy for us to sort of end our reflection there, really. But actually, what we're talking about is the fact that everything that's conditioned is supported by conditions. And even if it's just maintaining a semblance of continuity, like I feel that I do, even though I can see changes in myself, and this wooden floor looks the same as the day that I first came here, that semblance of continuity isn't what's really going on. What's really going on is much, much harder to examine. And the fact that I sort of feel like I'm getting into talking about things that I find hard to talk about, that when that everything that we deem to be substantial is transient or not substantial, not just because eventually it will come to an end, but because its very nature is not of substance, that moment to moment everything is sort of flickering into being, or not even being, but flickering from moment to moment as it passes through time, supported by a network of conditions that maintain it. And the minute those conditions are not there, for whatever reason, then what seems so substantial, so real, dissolves. So I think the flame reflection is possibly my favourite, but anyway, we'll go to Dewdrops, another attractive thing to contemplate. So the dewdrop has really come to have a whole poetic world of its own, a really, really beautiful symbol of impermanence. And I'm particularly thinking about there's a haiku tradition in Japan where where it's used as a metaphor, sort of like a really strong indicator in any poem, haiku. One of the images that's often brought in about to indicate impermanence and the sort of sadness. There's often this kind of melancholic yearning that can only come with the beauty of the fleeting. So there's a famous haiku by Japanese monk and poet called Issa, and it goes, "This dewdrop world is a dewdrop." Sorry, I'm just going to drink water first so I can pronounce it properly. This dewdrop world is a dewdrop world, and yet. It's very filled with longing, and actually the backstory is a story of grief, about the poignancy of having to let go of that which you love. So a very honest poem about having to letting go of loss, and understanding that the nature of things is transient, and yet the human heart does hold on, doesn't want to let go. Very, very evocative. But Bhante Sangharakshita says that Buddhists don't actually need to be sorrowful about this state of change, that nothing is lasting, and every moment is renewed and renewed, because what it means is that there's always potential for change, for the good. There's always potential for change for the good. So even really, really hard things that we didn't want to change, it means that it won't always be like that, and there's always potential for a new way of looking at things, a new way of understanding our wisdom to deepen in relation to that. And Bhante says, he talks about Buddhists even finding exhilaration in this phenomena of impermanence, which I think, I just wonder if we took that as a sort of mantra, can I find exhilaration in the transience of things? Like, what would that be like to apply it often, and just be looking optimistically, or I don't know if excitement's exactly a very Buddhist emotional quality, but let's use that word. Let's be excited by the potential for change, and that doesn't mean a sort of neurotic. He also warns against somewhere else a neurotic desire for change, like not ever being satisfied. Like, I must renew this, I must change my job, partner, just because of not being settled on something, or not wanting to commit. So it's different from that. It's not really about changing circumstances at all. It's about the nature the very, very essential nature of the transience of all things, of us, our thoughts, our fleeting emotions, even our habits, which we seem so stuck in, so perpetual. They can change. So beautifully optimistic outlook there from Sangharakshita. And another of the images is a dream. So a couple of the images I think are more to do with how we perceive things. So a dream, a moksha. Is there any others? Yeah, let's just use that. And the mirage that the Buddha spoke about. That our perception of things is actually sort of inherently faulty, that we have expectations and interpretations of the world that are inherently faulty. So a dream and a fault of vision, we could reflect in this way, like what is that dream? What is this fault of vision? Sangharakshita talks about how we apprehend reality in three ways. And the image he uses is mistaking, so it's an old Indian image, mistaking a snake for a rope. Mistaking a rope for a snake. Yeah, let's do it the safe way around. Mistaking a rope for a snake. So you see something curled up on the floor, immediately you think it's a snake. I think there's something very primal about human beings that are that's built in to spot snakes. They're very deadly, can be. So immediately we think it's a snake. Then we realise, it's just a piece of rope. So the first kind of, so they're called, the first kind of way of viewing things is called parikalpita. I've never heard this word said, I've only read it, so I don't know if I'm saying it right. For parikalpita, that's it, parikalpita. So that is a kind of delusion that's imputed or imagined. So it's like imagining something that's just not there, like that rope is a snake. And then there's the paratantra, which is a way of seeing things that is common sense. Oh look, thank goodness, it's not a snake, it's just that piece of rope that I left lying there. Okay, so that sort of common sense, undiluted, everyday way of seeing things. But from the Buddhist point of view, even that's deluded. And the final way of saying things is the paranishpanna, which is perfected knowledge, which sees that the rope, not only is it not a snake, but there is no such thing as rope. That the rope is just a continuum of conditions coming together, just happening to be in this formation at this moment in time. A kind of this final way of seeing things is this deeper wisdom that doesn't cling to concepts, doesn't rely on kind of false images or signs that and this clearer way of seeing can only happen with an emotional freedom. It's not an intellectual understanding in any way. It's an emotional freedom. It's as though at the same time of letting go of any need of self-making, of me and mine, this clarity comes. That clarity comes about not only us, but all nature, all phenomena. And of course that comes also with a huge upwelling of compassion, because there's no deluded sense of self to defend, no difference between outside and inside as we kind of have it in our minds. So although the illusion of self is not exactly of the same order as seeing snakes as ropes, or imagining that there's elephants galloping behind me or whatever, there's a much deeper, profound and harder to understand way of being, which is how a Buddha would see, that demands transcendental knowledge, transcendental wisdom. And as I was reading this, I was sort of laughing at myself, like, oh yeah, I think I probably imagine that I've got the measure, and I'm generally in the common sense way of seeing things, so I'm not prone to delusions. But then I think sometimes that the sort of motives I ascribe to, different different things, or like if I get a text message that I don't understand, or there's a whole string of miscommunications, what I do actually is fill in the rest of the story, which is tantamount to making a rope into a snake. Oh, she said that's because she wants da, 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 and she doesn't want me to, or whatever, or the sort of habitual misinterpretation of other people's behaviours. And actually, most of the time, people aren't thinking about me at all. They've got their own concerns. So it's all very well thinking, aiming for enlightenment, but sometimes just the mental rumination does create a whole set of delusions, and those delusions, the more we do that, the more likely we are to do it again. So I think that's where we'll end. Oh yeah, well maybe the last thing. No, we'll save that. We'll finish there. So in a minute we'll have a break, and then we'll have time for some questions, and then I might say that thing that I nearly just said. So just going to hand over to Shadagita.
Okay, hello again, and thank you so much, Kusalasara. She was a really lovely companion on this journey of evoking all those really beautiful images. And I really like the encouragement to, not just apply this thing about ropes and snakes to literal ropes and snakes, but also to apply it to, the inner workings of our mind, and how we interpret all kinds of conversations, texts, emails, etc., etc. So look out for the ropes and the snakes. Well, if tonight's anything to go by, then I think probably if you've been tuning in over the last few weeks of this series, then, God, you've just had a real treat, actually. It just seemed such a rich theme, and I'm sure you've all really, really benefited from listening to these both ancient words of wisdom, but also brought up, to the present, the modern day, finding ways to apply this text, this diamond cutter of a text to our daily lives. I'm going to ask you if you want to give, the LBC, the Dharma Night, some money. It's great if we can actually show our appreciation in that way. As you all will be very aware, the Buddhist Centre hasn't really been able to have classes for over a year now, not in person at least, and so many of you have already given so much, and we really, really appreciate that. But you could give again, and it would be great if you did. We're going to post a link So if you've got the means to, and you feel moved to, then give. And even if you don't feel completely moved to, just give. And just see what the effect is. As long as you've got the means to give. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I'm going to make a couple of announcements as well. So just things to kind of know that are coming up. So do look at our website first of all. It's got all the up-to-date information as schedules change, like classes go from being online to hybrid to in-person. Do keep an eye on all of that because they are changing from week to week. But also there is an online course, Early Mornings, that you might appreciate with Maitreya Bandhu, starting next week. So it's starting on the 7th till the 11th, 7:30 a.m. till 9 a.m. And it's called Towards Insight. So it'll be focusing on meditation. And I know that so many of you really benefited from the morning meditations here at the LBC during the last year. So many people have written to say how much they appreciated them. And although we can't offer them ongoingly anymore because, people's work's changing, the people who were able to offer those now have to go back to work, etc., etc. So, but we are able to offer one-off things. So this is an opportunity to give your meditation practice a little boost. So I'd really recommend that next week, Monday to Friday, 7:30 till 9 a.m. with Maitreya Bandhu. And also, next week, the Dharma Night is going to be focusing on a new theme. So it's going to be looking at a book from a member of our order, Vasantra, called Tales of Freedom. And different people will be drawing out themes from these Tales of Freedom. And from next week, the class will be hybrid. So we're going to put a link to let you know how you can sort of do that and a bit more information. So do check that out. That means some of you could book and be in person. Some of you can. Obviously, if you're in South Carolina or Dublin, you're not going to be able to fly here in person, much as we'd love to see you. But you will still be able to tune into Dharma Night. So yeah, we really hope that you do. And the last thing I'm going to say is I'm one of the people who teaches yoga here at the Buddhist Centre, and we've got a yoga intensive as well. And that's starting on the 14th of June, 14th till the 18th. And it's 5 early mornings, 7:30 till 9 a.m. and 5 early evenings, 5 till 6:15. It's all on Zoom and it's led by myself and Esther. So if you also want to give your yoga practice a boost, or if you want to try yoga, we won't be teaching it from beginner stage, but as long as you've done some yoga, you can just join in. It'd be great to see you. And it'd be great to see you at all of or any of these events. So yeah, we're going to take a short pause now and we'll be back soon. Thank you.